Well, that was an interesting week for The Ultimate Warrior. We were gifted two documentaries. This past Sunday, A&E released the biography on The Ultimate Warrior, and yesterday, as of recording this is Friday, Vice released their newest episode of The Dark Side of the Ring, which happens to be on The Ultimate Warrior. So Warrior Week is over, and to the surprise of no one, we were given two different documentaries depending on how you look at it and how you feel about Jim Hellwig. You may like one, dislike the other. You may like both. You may dislike both. Well, we're going to get into it today. This is going to be a different version of the Dark Side of the Ring review, or the Dick Side of the Ring. This one's going to be basically on the Ultimate Warrior. I wanted to wait and watch both episodes. I originally wanted to record it last night after we got done recording with after I got done recording with Andrew, but after watching the Dark Side of the Ring Warrior version, I kind of felt like I needed to wait a little bit, let let the documentary marinate, and have and kind of sleep on it and kind of give you my overall thoughts on it. Uh, but yes, you talk about really two different sides of the documentary. The A&E version obviously is going to be a lot longer, an hour and a half, and you have the likes of Dana Warrior and her kids. Dave Meltzer, it was on there. You have Ron Funches, Sam Roberts, Peter Rosenberg. Obviously, Vince McMahon is on there, and you even have archive interviews from Sting. So that's one version. The other version, you have Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, and Warrior's first wife, Sherry. So altogether, you kind of get an idea of who Jim Hellwig was, and really a complicated man he is. Controversial, yes. There's a lot of controversy that surrounded him, from his rapid rise to his sudden downfall, and just in the years of trying to stay relative. And we're gonna try to get. I'm gonna try and get to as much as we can. So starting off with the A&E version, obviously it's a much longer documentary, over an hour and a half. I do like the fact that A&E does talk more about his upbringing to give you an understanding of where he came from. Warrior was born and raised in Indiana. His father left him at an early age, so he was raised by a single mom, and you could tell that bothered him, and that shaped his worldview of not having a father figure. That ends up becoming a recurring theme throughout his life. So as he was going through high school, he befriends his actually he was mentored by his high school football coach, who encouraged him uh, to work out and to build his body. And as he was building his body, he started liking the results. He became addicted to it, and this was around the time where bodybuilding became huge. So by the time he graduated and ended up going to chiropractor school, bodybuilding was huge. It was the 1980s. You had Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Universe, uh, the greatest bodybuilder of all time, who ended up having this huge success in Hollywood. And a lot of people, a lot of bodybuilders at the time wanted to replicate Arnold's success. They saw Arnold as like the blueprint for success in the bodybuilding world. Unfortunately for Jim, that didn't quite work out, so he ended up making a detour when he was staying in Southern California, and it was due to the man by the name of Rick Bassman. He ran into Rick Bassman, who hooked him up with another bodybuilder at the time, Steve Borden, Sting, and they really became a tag team that they were trying to shop around to different territories. Eventually, they ended up going to Memphis and Mid South, working with Bill Watts, and it was there where we see the beginning of really where Warrior really wanted to work on his own. Um, these guys were massive. Both Hellwig and Sting back then were massive, and just for whatever reason, that tag team didn't work out. Uh, Depending on who you believe, it looked like that Sting had a falling out with Warrior, to the surprise of no one. So Warrior goes to Dallas to World Class Championship Wrestling. He has some success, but more importantly, it was to get eyes on him from New York, and this is where he gets the call to go to WWE. We see the Warriors' rapid rise, and really, the A&E version, they do talk a lot about what happened from up until 91. And it seems like the 90, 91, 90 was Warriors' peak. I noticed on both versions, they didn't talk a lot about um, Rick Rude, who I thought was influential in making the Ultimate Warrior. They did talk about Honky Tonk Man, how Honky Tonk Man was beaten 30 seconds by Warrior on the A&E version. Uh, a little disappointed they didn't mention Rick Rude at all. I felt that Rick Rude was another reason as to why Ultimate Warrior became so big in the WWE. And you talk about another underrated talent, Rick Rude, man. Like this guy, I think this guy would be fine in this era. Just the amount of heat that he draws, he has the look, he has the athleticism, he has the ring ability. He would have done just fine in any era. But um, I was a little disappointed that neither version talked about Rick Rude. So we go into 91, or I'm sorry, 1990, and all roads lead to Hulk Hogan. If you were a young wrestling fan back then, that was the talk. Were you an Ultimate Warrior fan or were you a Hulk Hogan fan? And to a lesser extent, yeah, you could say Randy Savage, but really those were the two. Those were the two biggest names at the time. And WrestleMania 6 came. It was one of the biggest matches of all time. It's actually really the first time that Vince McMahon decided to do a babyface versus babyface match, and it worked. If you think about it now, it worked. And back then, I really was not. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved that match. Warrior Hogan was like the ultimate match. And then as I got older, it wasn't. It kind of died on me. But then looking back at it now and understanding the significance, once again, understanding the significance of that main event, I've opened it up to him a lot more. And I want to say something about Warrior being a terrible worker. Uh, in the Vice version, Jim Ross and Jim Cornette bury the shit out of him. If you thought JR buried him was bad, go back and watch Grilling JR about the Ultimate Warrior, where him and Conrad Thompson were talking about the Ultimate Warrior. 2 hours of brutality. Jim Ross does not like this man, and neither does Jim Cornette. So 1990, going back to WrestleMania, that is one of the biggest matches I've ever done, really, and it still holds up to this day. Babyface versus babyface, the passing of the torch, and that's really what the idea was behind it. Vince wanted to pass the torch over from Hogan to Warrior, thinking that Hogan was too old. At the time, Hogan was 36 years old. You talk about a different mindset back then compared to now. 36 years old for right now for a lot of the WWE stars, they're basically at their peak. They're in the main event. Hell, even some of the guys are a lot older than 36. I mean, you look at AJ Styles, he's over 40. Lashley's over 40. Drew McIntyre's 36. I think Seth Rollins just turned 35, if I'm not mistaken, today. So you talk about a world difference and a different viewpoint from 1990 compared to now. So Ultimate Warrior wins. He becomes the WWE champion, and really both versions harping on the fact that that was really where he was at his peak, and his career just took a downturn for the worse. In the A&E version, I noticed that they didn't really go into the details as to why his marriage was crumbling apart or why it wasn't working. Whereas in the Vice version, you have Warrior's ex-wife, or the first wife, I should say, Sherry there, and she was shown throughout the documentary quite a bit. She talks about how uh, it was not even 2 months after Warrior won the WWE title that she saw the transformation unfold, where he went from Jim Hellwig to the Ultimate Warrior, and it was during that time that Warrior stopped answering her calls, and give me a sec. Sorry about that. I've just been experiencing technical difficulties. So as I was saying, we see the transformation from Sherry's perspective of from Jim Hellwig to the Ultimate Warrior, and it is noted that Warrior during this time would keep an itinerary of dates, or really of places he'd go and the women he'd be meeting up with. And if you're trying to cheat on someone, if you're just trying to cheat on someone, not that this is actual legal advice, but if you're going to do that, maybe don't do it written down. Don't have it written down on your day planner. Maybe you want to kind of just not leave any evidence. I'm just saying, just again, this is not legal advice. I'm just saying. Uh, but yeah, I thought that, and that was not on either documentary. That was actually on. Uh, that's been was actually in the Ultimate Warrior biography. And and actually speaking of which, the author of the Ultimate Warrior biography was in the A&E version. So I thought giving that insight was actually very good. But going back to the Warrior 91, this is where I thought this whole timeline as well, like 1991 was very interesting because uh, the way that A&E portrayed it, seemed like it was just a misfortune of events that just did not work out. The marriage was not going to work. Whereas in the Vice version, it was because the warrior was on the road, being, just going out, having fun, partying, and uh, cheating. So that seemed like you got two different versions of what happened. Uh, it appears that the Ultimate Warrior title reign was I don't want to say very good, but it wasn't to Vince's liking. So Vince had no choice but to eventually take the belt off. I do want to mention though that Jake the Snake Roberts, who happened to be interviewed on the Vice version, he gives a story that Vince came up to him and approached him to feud with the Warrior, and that the Warrior was going to drop the belt to Jake. There was one problem with what Jake said because excuse me, where Jake got his timeline mixed up because he said this happened in '91, and that could not have happened in '91 or after SummerSlam of '91 because he tells a story about how originally after SummerSlam he didn't say what year that the next feud for the Warrior was going to be Jake Roberts and it was going to be for the WWE title. Now, I'm not saying Jake is lying. Maybe he was promised by Vince that you're gonna get a title shot. You're gonna be next in line. But Jake in 1990 was a babyface, and Warrior was the WWE champion. Uh, Warrior did have a match with Rick Rude at SummerSlam of 1990, but he didn't really have a rivalry or a feud after. It seemed like that his title run was on the back burner. So maybe there was talk of turning Jake heel to go after Warrior, but the way that Jake presented it made it seem like that happened in 1991 because Jake was telling about it happening to him in 91, which could not have happened because Jake at the time in 91 just turned heel and was ready to set up his feud with Randy Savage. So I thought that was a little strange right there. But then again, I'm not really surprised given that it is Jake Roberts and his memory may not be. A lot of the guys on here, their memories are not as good as they once were, and Jake's no exception. I'm sure the years of alcohol and drug abuse that'll do that to him. So and age as well. So um, I thought that was a little strange that he told that story, and it seemed like the timeline was not correct. Uh, but yeah, that would have been interesting to see though. Like in 1990, like I think he could have done it after SummerSlam '90. Maybe have a recently turned Jake Roberts and the Ultimate Warrior. I could have been cool with that. Um, Now, would you have done the title change at that time? Who's to say? It would have. I think that would have changed a lot of really 1991. But the end goal was still going to be the same. Vince saw the Ultimate Warrior's title run is not very good, so he wanted to get the belt back on Hogan. Um, Going back to like the A&E version, I just want to talk about a couple of other things as well. Uh, Shane McMahon was interviewed, and Shane was asked, "Did Vince, or actually, Shane was asked, did Warrior see Vince as a father figure?" And I thought Shane's answer was that yeah, he probably saw him, but Vince didn't see Warrior as something as a son, and there's only one son that Vince has, and that's him. And I just thought that was kind of a I thought that was really interesting that Shane had said that because a lot of the wrestlers, a lot of the guys who worked for Vince, they look up to Vince in a father figure way. I mean, obviously, Warrior was one, Bret Hart was another, Steve Austin. When you're one of the top guys in the company and you work close to Vince, you're going to be put in a situation where you guys are going to be working 24/7, and it kind of comes off as a paternalistic relationship. But Shane says he only has one son, and that's him. I mean, really two if you think about it, him and Hunter. But that's a different story in of itself. Paul Heyman's another guy that was in the A&E documentary. I thought he was excellent. Whenever you get Paul Heyman in an interview situation, whether it's a work or a shoot, Heyman knows how to talk. He conducts himself very well, and adding his story, I mean, he told everyone that you can tell that there was professional jealousy between Hogan and Warrior. Um, Warrior wanted Hogan's spot. There was no doubt about that. His rapid rise to the top, felt that he could take over Hogan's spot. Um, Whether that was the case or not, I mean, as we turned out that wasn't going to end up happening. But you could tell there was a professional rivalry that ended up becoming very personal. One of the most infamous stories that I don't remember a whole lot back then that the A&E version did bring up, and everyone happens to be talking about it, was when Warrior was the WWE champion. He was going through the airport, and a kid had come up to him and asked him for his autograph, and Warrior had kind of said no, but in a way that kind of was dismissive and seemed like he wasn't very kind to the kid. And unfortunately for the kid's father happens to be an affiliate was running networks for WWE programming in one of its TV territories. So he wasn't very happy about it, and when Vince got wind of it, he forced the Warrior to issue an apology. And A&E, I'm glad they showed the outtakes from that interview, and you could tell that Warrior was not happy to do it. And one of the classic lines is, "It's a work." I'm sure that's going to be I'm sure that's already a meme. If it isn't, it's going to be a meme by the end of the weekend. You could tell Warrior was not happy, and in Warrior's mind, he felt that he did nothing wrong, but Vince said, "Just apologize. This is all a work. Just apology. Just do it." Uh, I thought that was really interesting. Taker happened to be on there, and he was telling that story. Then we get to '91. Um, the SummerSlam event, as I mentioned with briefly with about the Jake Roberts Ultimate Warrior potential feud. Warrior lists his letter, his infamous letter, and both versions do talk about the letter. Uh, the Vice version goes a little bit more into detail about the letter, stating that Warrior did tell his ex-wife about the letter, and she knew right away this was a bad idea. This was a disastrous idea. So the story goes that Warrior felt that he was on par with Hogan. So in his mind, he wanted to make as much money as Hulk Hogan was. I can't really blame Warrior to be in that situation. I mean, he was on top. He felt that he felt equal. And you know what? If that's how much you think you're worth, shoot your shot and see what happens. But it made him seem like that he did hold the event hostage. He wrote the letter to him weeks ago. and Vince had already advertised the pay-per-view. And Vince, then Vince's mind, he's like, I can't just rescind the main event because I'm not going to meet this guy's demands. So he'll meet his demands, but after the show was over, after the match was over, he was going to fire Warrior. So that story was true. So we get to SummerSlam '91. We see that Slaughter was interviewed, and he talks about how uh, he was approached by, I believe it was Hogan. Hogan comes up to him and tells him about a spot to throw Warrior outside, and him, Sheik, and General Adnan would break the Warrior's legs, almost similar to Hogan getting his legs broken by the Sheik when Vern Gagne put a hit on Hogan for jumping ship back in '84. And who was the common denominator? Well, aside from Hogan, Iron Sheik. So, anyways, that doesn't quite work out, and it seems like after his second run in from '92, really until 2014, a lot of the stuff they kind of just don't really talk a lot about, especially his wrestling career. They didn't talk a lot about '96. The A&E version did. The Vice did go into a little bit about '96. Neither version talked about WCW. I mean, I know his WCW run was bad, but you got to talk about WCW because that was a good part. That was part of his wrestling career, regardless of how horrible it was. Uh, Now, as we go into the end of the A&E documentary, this is where they begin to talk about the infamous Yukon speech, where he gave a lecture at the University of Connecticut back in 2005. And this was at the time where Warrior wanted to reinvent himself, and he saw himself as more of a conservative motivational speaker. And as he was giving the speech at the University of Connecticut, he was talking about his problems with the Western world. In particular, he felt that homosexuality was wrong. And the most infamous line that came out of it was, "Queering doesn't make the world work," which rightfully so, the students that were there, they were offended by what he said, and did not look very well. Now the A&E version, they made it seem like this was a one-time thing, and that he made peace after that, and we see Warrior making friends with people from outside of different perspectives. I'm not saying that is completely that's true or false. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he probably realized he fucked up, but it was not a one-time thing. And at least in the Vice version, they made you realize like this guy has said some terrible things. He has said some racist shit. He has said some homophobic shit. He's wished death on people for whatever reason. I mean, obviously, the most glaring example was wishing that Bobby Heenan would rot in hell after he found out that he had cancer. Bobby Heenan did not like the Ultimate Warrior. Uh, in the Vice documentary, Cornette talks about how uh, Warrior was not careful with Heenan. Heenan has had a history of neck problems, and of all the years he's taken bumps, it showed. And Heenan had told Warrior, "Please be careful. Please protect my neck." Warrior just did not listen, and uh, yeah, when Heenan was alive, he did not like the Ultimate Warrior. You can go back and watch the Self Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, and you'll get more thoughts on what Heenan thinks of the man. But yeah, it was not just a one-time thing. Warrior has repeatedly said these things, and it was pretty bad. I mean, I understand that if you're trying to be conservative, you might have these ideas, but this is not conservatism. This is just the mind of a wacko who was homophobic, racist. It was just bad. A couple things he said that did show up on the Vice documentary. He compared black people to savages. Uh, he wished that Katrina had wiped out New Orleans because of its sin. This was when obviously when New Orleans was wrecked by Hurricane Katrina back in the mid 2000s. Just some really awful stuff. Now, the Vice documentary did talk a little bit about 1996 and the second run and how Warrior wanted to try to reinvent himself, but ultimately did not work out. Cornette and Jim Ross were in there because at the time they were tied to the hip to Vince McMahon. JR was talent relations. Cornette was one of the bookers for the matches at the time, and I just thought this line was hilarious. Uh, both these guys were trying to. They tell a story about going to Arizona, where Cornette, McMahon, and JR go to Arizona to talk to the Warrior to try to see if they can work out a deal for him to come back in '96. Warrior's pitching this idea about being a motivational speaker, and he wants to spread his philosophy of destrucity. Destrucity. Destrucite. JR says, "What the fuck is destrucity?" Cornette attempts to explain it, and the definition that he gives is truth in between destiny and reality, where you can stay time yourself while achieving your goals. I'm sure I miswrote it because my handwriting's bad, but even if I didn't, what the fuck does that even mean? This guy is just out there. I mean, you could tell like this is just so hokey pokey motivational speaker bullshit. And he was trying to get that and his comic book career going, and uh, to no one's surprise, it just did not work out. '96 was just not a good year for the Warrior. They go into a little bit of detail about the infamous match with him and Triple H, where he beats Triple H in 90 seconds. Oh man, what else? And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I mean, when it comes to the documentaries, the Vice version is more negative. It's a quicker watch. If you love the Ultimate Warrior as a kid and you haven't seen or heard of these stories, you may not be too fond of it, but that's going to be a real shocker if you've been living under a rock for the past 20 plus years. I think everyone's well aware of the Ultimate Warrior's problems. The A&E version, you could call it more of a fluff piece. I think it's not really fair to call it a fluff piece. I think because I think that's a little bit disrespectful to Dana and the kids. They saw they saw Jim Hellwig as their father. And yes, this guy has done and said a lot of bad shit over the years, but to them, that was their father. So you can't take that away from them. That doesn't excuse Warrior for all the shit he's done, though. By no means it does. And Dana Warrior was not really, I mean, to no one's surprise, she was not happy with the Vice documentary. She called it a hit piece. Uh, I believe in retaliation, or in retaliation to the comments made by Dana Warrior, Vice does have a shirt up for sale. Let me see if I can find it right now. I'll get you that link real quick. Give me a second. Sorry about that. So yeah, if you go to prowrestlingtees.com, it's going to be up there. Smut and Filth. It should be under the Dark Side of the Ring um, banner, and all proceeds of the sale of the shirt will go to Queer Art New York City in support for LGBTQ plus artists. So if you're interested, go check it out. It's basically a shirt that just says smut and filth. Uh, but yeah, I just thought that was real interesting. Overall, just gather my overall thoughts. Sitting on the A&E version for almost a week and sitting on the Vice version overnight. Looking back at both documentaries, you get kind of a more complete picture of the Ultimate Warrior, even though it's not a full, complete version. There's still a lot of details missing from both sides. Uh, the A&E version does go into more detail about the Ultimate Warrior's upbringing and how he was raised, how he was brought up, and he kind of became the man that he is. Both versions seem like there is a recurring theme, and that is that the absence of his father did did affect him. Let's put it that way. And you could tell, like, and also I'm glad both versions mention it. Uh, I think more so the Vice version mentioned. Actually, no, both versions did mention that Warrior's family has had a history of dying at a young age. So I'm sure that had to factor into his life and how he lived his life, because he felt that he was going to die at a young age as well. Um, when his father died in the 90s, his father, I think, was in his mid 50s, which is around the same age that Warrior was when he passed away. So that's another thing that I took away from watching both documentaries. As I mentioned, the Vice one's only 45 minutes. It really was more negative to the Warrior, obviously because of the people they interviewed, Jim Ross, Jim Cornette. They did not enjoy working with Warrior in the mid 90s. You had Warrior's ex-wife who was on there. She was, for the most part, told these stories about how what happened with it to the divorce, and you have the A&E version. Obviously, you have Warrior's family, and it was kind of more of to try to make it more positive. But I'm glad the A&E version did acknowledge the Yukon speech, but you had no choice but to do it. You really had no choice but to present that. It just was an incomplete picture, as it was not a one-time thing. Warrior has said a lot of bad stuff at that time as well. So go ahead and check out both documentaries. Let us know what you think. The most recent episode of the podcast should be dropping today. We talk about the fallout from the Raw announce team, and we give our predictions for Double or Nothing, which is going to be this Sunday. Dynamite is going to air tonight, so we're giving our predictions before the go home show for Dynamite, but it seems like it's kind of going to be the same after tonight. Uh, Keep your eyes open on social media. I'm gonna try to keep doing this on a weekly basis. I actually enjoy doing these reviews. And yeah, keep our eyes open on social media. We might try to do a Double or Nothing review this weekend if we have time. If not, we're going to save it for the main show. And next week, it's going to be another episode of another review on the Dark Side of the Ring. I think next week's going to be on the Smith family. That's going to be very dark. I think that one is going to be probably the darkest one of the entire series. So, and there's been a lot of dark ones, but I think this one may take the cake. So uh, keep your eyes open on social media. I can't wait for this episode. And until then, you guys be safe out there. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Late.